Hello, welcome back from your weekend. This week here, we're going to continue on with some complex numbers. I know last week you were kind of working on what complex numbers are, and you were adding them, multiplying them, doing those kind of things, which, the multiplying bit, yeah, takes a little bit of foiling, but it's not too bad in the end. Today, what we're going to go over is how do we divide complex numbers and how does that work, right? How do we do that stuff? And at first, it's a little bit complicated, right? We're not just going to straight up divide those complex numbers. So here's an example. Here's one complex number, 2 minus 5i, and then we're going to divide that by 2 plus 3i. So we have to come up with something a little bit different here because, we can't really distribute this stuff. We can't just cancel the 2's. That's not going to be possible because they're both kind of in parentheses in a sense. They're a part of that whole term. So we do have to go over something a little bit different. We're actually going to use multiplication to do division because those two are very interconnected. But what we need to go over first is what is called a conjugate. Okay? So here I'm going to take this just single. Okay, we can do a conjugate of one complex number, right? This whole thing, 2 plus 3i, is one complex number. And then to make its conjugate, what we do is we switch or change whatever this middle thing is, right? From positive to negative or from negative to positive. Either way, we just switch that. So here we'd switch from 2 plus 3i to 2 minus 3i. That is its conjugate. Okay, that's how we would switch that. And now here's where the key thing is conjugates have this very special specific property that happens when we multiply them. If we multiply conjugates together, all right, and this one here, I've got to get rid of this stuff. If we do this multiplying, 2 minus 3i, 2 plus 3i. So I'm going to distribute just like you guys were doing last week, and I'll multiply this 2 through. So that'd be 2 times 2 plus 2 times 3i, and then we send in the negative 3i. We distribute that. So in this negative 3i, there's negative 6i, negative 3 times 2 here, and then negative 3i times positive 3i makes negative 9i squared. We do have to remember that squared. A lot of times people will forget that, so we want to put that there. And so once we put that in, now we can go ahead and simplify this stuff a little bit, right? We can notice two things are going to happen. Number one, this is a positive 6i and a negative 6i. This should always happen when you multiply times a conjugate. All that stuff should go away. And then the second thing that we should be able to do is we should say, hey, I squared, I remember that from last week, I squared is negative 1. So that should change this to a positive 9 in that case, which then we can just do 4 plus 9 is 13. We should be able to do that. So in here, whenever you multiply by a conjugate, you should get just a single number as a result when all is said and done. And that's the key feature that we're going to use. If you multiply by a conjugate, you get one single number to come out of that. Yeah. So let me show you how we would use that in division. So in here, if we have this again is the same question that we had up here. It's just usually when we do division, we put it as a fraction rather than putting that division sign. So in here, I've just kind of put some steps here. These are in your guys' assignments as well, just to help you work through those stuff, work through these pieces. If you want to write it out by hand, you certainly can. But this is just to help you keep track of what's going on. So first, what we want to do is use the conjugate. So in here, I want to use the conjugate of the denominator only. Right? We're not going to use the conjugate of the numerator. Don't care about that. Just the denominator. So here I'm going to put 2 minus 3i because that's the conjugate of the denominator, and I've got to do that to both spots. I've got to put it on both the numerator and the denominator in order to keep that balanced. So now what we can do is we can multiply the denominator stuff through, which guess what? We already did this part, right? Right here, we already did that part. So I'm not going to do it again. We've already done that. We know the denominator is 13. And then the numerator, we just have to distribute those pieces through like normal. So I'm just going to, you guys can go back and double check that. Here we'd have 2 times 2. We'd have 2 times this part here. So that's negative 6i. And then we'd have, negative 5 times 2. Right? There's that I. and negative, so we'd have positive 15i. Whoops, don't need all those shortcuts, just need squared. And so then in there, then we could take our chance to simplify this stuff up. Obviously, the new denominator, we already did the simplifying process here, right? We saw that that was 13. The numerator we can simplify down. We could say, well, this is really 4 minus 15, because again, that I squared is -1. So really, this is 4 minus 15 in that case, which is -9 there. And then we also have a -6 and a -10, so -16i. And that's the end. Like, we would just leave it like this as this weird fraction. So we've essentially divided those things out. If you wanted to be really fancy, we could put -9 over 13 and -16 over 13, right? That's all. But then we're done, right? We've done a little bit of multiplying, or we use the conjugates, and we do a little bit of multiplying, and then we simplify. That's all there is to it. There's just those few steps to that. So I'm going to do one more as an example. If that's making sense to you and you want to jump into the assignment, you go ahead. I'm just going to put one more example here, in case people want to see that worked out. So here, this one, I would use the conjugate of the denominator again, right? So here would be 8 plus 6i. I'm just going to change this from negative to positive. So then here, that would also be 8 plus 6i. I've got to put the same thing. That's why they made them the same color, to remind you. Same thing there and there. And then we just multiply that stuff through. So on the denominator, I should multiply those two. 8 times 8. 8 times 6 being 48. And then -6 times 8. Do these front ones. -48i. And then we'd have -6 and -36i squared. Right? That's what those ones would be in there. And then I'm going to do the numerator. Multiply everything here by 10, so that's not too bad. 80 plus 60i. I have to remember to multiply both of them. And now this top stuff, there's not much to simplify there. That's 80 plus 60i. And then this bottom here, well, we have 64. These ones are gone, right? Maybe I can put a little, let's put a line through those two, so I know, hey, those two canceled each other out. Get nice and red, and yeah, those two are gone. And then the -36i squared becomes positive 36. Really, this is 64 plus 36, which is 100. Yeah, and now you can stop there. This is perfectly fine. We did that in the last one. We said, okay, we're done right there. But this one here, you could go one step further if you want to. You don't have to, but you can if you want. Here, since everything, you have to reduce between all three pieces. Now you can't just reduce between like the 80 and the 100. You have to reduce between all of them. So all of these are actually divisible by 20. Okay, so if we reduce everything there by 20, okay, we would have 80 divided by 20 is 4, and then 60 divided by 20 is 3i, and then that's all over 100 divided by 20, which is 5. Okay, so that's okay to do if you reduce everything down. I'm actually just going to put that final result up here. I'll put an arrow leading up to that. But as long as we reduce everything, I mean, you could divide each by 10 as well, but then you could be able to divide by 2 on that one. So as long as you're able to reduce everything, you can. Or I'm perfectly fine if you just leave this as it is without doing any extra canceling. As long as we do the simplifying here and here, right? Add the like terms together, changing the I squared to -1, that's perfectly fine. You can just leave it right here. That's good. If you want to reduce it a little bit more and be really fancy, you certainly can do that. So your guys' assignment is down below. Again, same type of setup. I just put those steps there to remind you: conjugate, multiply, simplify, and you just have to fill in those boxes as you go through. But you have those 4 questions down below. If you guys have anything else, things come up and you want to ask me a question, send me one. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow.